Good afternoon and welcome. This webinar is a collaboration between the United States Department of Veterans Affairs, Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, and the National Cemetery Administration Scheduling Office. My name is Nicholas Walters. I am one of the outreach specialists in CFBNP, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. Everyone's mic has been muted. If you have any questions during the presentation today, please type it in the Q&A box to the right of the screen. I will read the questions at the end of the presentation, and the presenter will provide a response. This presentation will be provided to everyone who registered and joined today's webinar. This is a live recording. At this time, I would like to thank Mr. J. Dalrymple and Mr. Steve Ecker for this collaboration, and we are grateful for your time today. But before we get started, I would like to introduce Mr. Conrad Washington, the Director for the VA Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. Conrad Washington serves as the director for the VA Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. Mr. Washington is retired from the United States Marine Corps with over 20 years of active duty service with a combat tour in 2004 in support of Operation Enduring Iraqi Freedom. Mr. Washington is a licensed minister, actively serving in his faith. He received his master's degree of divinity in pastoral studies from Moody Theological Seminary. He also holds a MA in Business Administration and a Bachelor's of Science degree in Education. Additionally, he is a graduate of VA's class of 2017 Virtual Aspiring Leaders. At this time, Mr. Washington.
Thank you, Nicholas. I appreciate it. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. We appreciate it. You know, there's a lot of places you could be, but you chose to be with us today, and I believe today will be beneficial to all of us. I also want to thank Jay and Steve for taking time out of their schedules today. They're from the VA's National Cemetery Administration Scheduling Office as they share information today on pre-need and burial eligibility. I know that's not a popular topic and it's something that we all don't particularly like to discuss, but I can tell you that we all will leave this world at some point, and the information today will be very helpful to those family members as well. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope this you have any questions for us, please let us know. We will address those. So thank you very much again.
Thank you for those opening remarks, Mr. Washington. At this time, I would like to introduce Mr. J. Dalrymple for opening remarks. Please see a full summary of his bio to the right of the screen. Mr. J. Dalrymple is the Director of the National Cemetery Scheduling Office, the Deputy Director of the Field Programs. Mr. Dalrymple was named Director of the National Cemetery Scheduling Office and Deputy Director of the Field Programs effective October 13, 2019. He is responsible for all scheduling and eligibility activities, including pre-need administrations for veterans and family members. At this time, I give you Mr. J. Dalrymple.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the privilege to speak with you today. So as I said, my name is Jay Dalrymple. I'm with the NCA portion of VA, and I'm the director of the NCA's National Cemetery Scheduling Office located here in St. Louis, Missouri. With me today, I also bring with me Steve Ecker, who is the assistant director of the scheduling office. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with NCA, the VA operates 155 national cemeteries and 34 soldiers' lots and monuments in 42 different states and including Puerto Rico. There are more than 4 million Americans, including veterans of every war and conflict, buried in VA's national cemeteries. Veterans have earned these burial benefits through service and sacrifice of our nation. The scheduling office was established to support our veterans and their family members during one of their most difficult times in their lives. Almost all requests for burials in the National Cemetery now come through the scheduling office. So we like to say we're the gateway to NCA. Today, we're here to provide you with some information on a couple of very important topics. First one being, what does it take to be eligible for burial in the National Cemetery? So we're going to provide some high-level eligibility requirements there. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the pre-need burial program that NCA offers to veterans, service members, and their dependents. We also want to be able to answer any questions you may have, so please submit those in the chat, and we will address those at the end. So without further ado, I will turn this over to Steve Ecker for the presentation for you.
Now I would like to introduce Mr. Steve Ecker, who will be giving today's presentation. Please see a full summary of his bio to the right of the screen. Mr. Steve Ecker was named the Assistant Director of the National Cemetery Scheduling Office effective April 12th, 2020. In the position, Mr. Ecker is responsible for assisting the director with all scheduling and eligibility activities for veterans and their families. Mr. Ecker began his career with the NCSO in November of 2010 as a program support assistant. He has served in various positions within NCSO. At this time, I give you Mr. Steve Ecker.
Thank you, Nicholas, and thank you, of course, Mr. Washington. As Jay said, we're excited to be able to bring this information to you and always look forward to supporting this initiative. As Jay mentioned, this is information that's sometimes tough to talk about and something we may not think about, but it's very important to realize that VA and NCA are here to serve our veterans one last time and get them the dignified burials in our national shrines that they deserve. So if we could, go to the first slide. So our agenda for today, we're going to cover just a few high-level topics. We're going to discuss general eligibility requirements for a national cemetery, what is included in the burial benefit, some frequently asked questions, and we'll discuss the pre-need program, kind of giving an overview of how it works and filling out the form, how to submit a pre-need application. Slide. So let's first start off basic. And again, a lot of people aren't really aware of NCA's burial benefit, but at a high level, what does the burial benefit include? It includes a grave site in any of our national cemeteries with available space, and we can accommodate casket or cremation burials, depending on what's available at that cemetery. VA provides a grave liner or a vault. It's a concrete liner for casketed interments. Opening and closing of the grave site is provided and perpetual care of the grave site. Government headstone, marker, or niche cover is also provided. A burial flag, presidential memorial certificate is provided at the time of service by the National Cemetery. Military honors are technically not part of the burial benefit, but we do support families in obtaining the information to schedule those. Slide. So let's talk about some things that aren't included in the burial benefit, some things that are family responsibilities. Costs associated with funeral home preparation or services, costs pertaining to cremation services. There's some misunderstanding out there. The VA does not provide cremation services. That is family costs and family's responsibility to coordinate that. Costs for purchasing a casket or an urn. Again, any funeral home costs or any fees associated with the funeral or preparation services are family responsibility. And to that, transportation of any sort, to include transportation to the National Cemetery, and cost of funeral home storage. So the easiest way to remember this, we like to tell families, once you drive through the gates with your loved one, the NCA picks up everything from there. Next slide. Through different iterations of this briefing, we decided to pull a few frequently asked questions that we were receiving consistently from the groups. Can I be buried in any national cemetery? Veterans and eligible dependents can be buried in any national cemetery with available space. So for instance, if someone's in California, they may be relocating to New York or may have family in New York or might have grown up in New York. As long as there's available space in the National Cemetery in New York, they're more than welcome to be buried in that cemetery. Is the spouse required to be buried in the same national cemetery as the veteran? The veteran and the spouse do not have to be interred same cemetery. And if say the veteran passes away and the surviving spouse has relocated to a different part of the country, family is now there and it's more convenient to visit their loved one there, they can be buried in any national cemetery. Will my spouse be buried next to me or with me in the same gravesite? Non-veteran spouses are interred in the same gravesite. In the instance of a situation where it's a veteran married to a veteran, there is the opportunity to reserve what we call an adjacent gravesite or set aside for that surviving spouse at their time of need. In this case, both spouses are eligible veterans in their own right and entitled to their own plot. But it's the family's option to be buried together as well. Does it matter if I am casket or cremated? Again, this depends on availability at the National Cemetery and what they can accommodate, and of course, family wishes. Slide. Some additional questions. Is my wife listed on the headstone also? Veteran information is generally on the front and the spouse information is on the back of the headstone. So yes, the wife or spouse's information is included on the headstone. Can I get a headstone if I'm cremated? A headstone or marker is required for all remain types and is provided. Whether it's an upright or flat headstone kind of depends on the disposition of the remains and the cemetery. Are there costs to have my spouse buried? Just like the veteran's entitlement, there are no costs associated for burying a spouse. But again, families are responsible for any of the fees that we covered on a few of the first slides before arriving at the National Cemetery. Can I request just a service and military honors if I'm not being interred in a national cemetery? This happens quite a bit. It's what we refer to as a memorial service. Families are able to do that and they're allotted time for a service and military honors. And if the family decides to be buried at a later date, they have that option as well. What is the difference between in-ground cremation burial and being placed in the columbarium wall? In-ground cremation is like a traditional burial where the urn is placed in a gravesite, similar to a casket. Columbarium niche is above ground in the wall, sometimes called mausoleums. Slide. You'll see on the slide a picture of a standard VA issued headstone. On the right side, you'll see the different information that's listed. I won't go through all this, but if maybe a lot of you on the call have visited a national cemetery and have seen a headstone, but generally it's the person's name, branch of service, date of death, and date of birth, and their rank, any war periods that they served in. Family also has the option to provide an additional inscription, term of endearment, or different saying of the family's choice, and an emblem of belief. Generally, those are requested and coordinated through the cemetery at the time of interment. The cemetery will provide that information. Next slide. So let's change gears here a little bit and talk about who is eligible for burial in National Cemetery. Like many VA benefits, veterans, service members, spouses, and dependents may be eligible for burial in National Cemetery. One of the following must be true to qualify for the burial benefit. A veteran who didn't receive a dishonorable discharge, or a service member who died while on active duty for training, or an inactive duty for training. Spouse, as we discussed, is eligible, and in some cases, minor children of veterans, and also unmarried adult children can be eligible. Those generally require a little more verification, but in some cases, unmarried adult children can be eligible to be placed with their veteran. Slide. So this slide kind of defines how NCA defines a veteran. Veteran is a person who served on active military, naval, or air service, and whose discharge was under conditions other than dishonorable. Kind of a high level of definition of veteran. Next slide. So let's talk about a few common categories that we deal with and see on a regular basis. The first one is a veteran with one or more days of active duty. This pertains to enlisted members who served on or before September 7th, 1980, or officers who served before October 6th, 1981. Prior to those two dates, an enlisted person only needed to have technically 1 day of service and a discharge other than dishonorable conditions. They would be eligible for burial in a national cemetery as long as the service was in a regular component. Slide. So to build on the last slide, after 1980, requirement was put in to require 24 months of active service. So after September 7th, 1980, or October 16th of 81, there's a requirement for discharge under other than dishonorable conditions, but now there's a 24-month requirement. So the veteran had to serve 2 years and meet the requirements listed on the previous slide. So an important date to remember, September 7th, 1980. That's an important date because prior to that, the 24-month requirement does not apply. So you can have less than 24 months and still be eligible. After that date, there is a 2-year requirement. Slide. Some other persons eligible categories. VA benefits and burial are granted to persons recognized as receiving pension or compensable status. So any veteran who was receiving disability pension or service-connected disability pension qualifies for burial. Slide. This slide here talks about the spouses or unremarried surviving spouses. So as we discussed, the spouses are eligible for burial as long as the spouse was married to the veteran at their time of death. The spouse could actually remarry, again, as long as they were married to that veteran at their time of death, and that spouse would still be eligible to be placed with that veteran if the family so chooses. Next slide. So now let's talk about some common reasons for denial. Unfortunately, here at NCA, we pride ourselves on being different than some other VA agencies where we like to say we advocate and we want to get to yes as much as possible. We go to great lengths to find whatever information we need to try to make that possible. But unfortunately, like any benefit, we do have to deny cases. First one highlighted is DVA. That stands for dishonorable for VA purposes. So in the event request for burial is received and that veteran does not have honorable service, we will send that to the regional office for adjudication, and then that veteran's benefit and service is deemed dishonorable for VA purposes. Active duty for training is one we deal with quite a bit. This pertains mostly specifically to reservists or National Guardsmen. This is where they might have served their 6-year enlistment, but were never called to active duty for other than training purposes. So in this case, that reservist or guards member would not meet the active duty requirement. As we discussed on the previous slide, less than 24 months. So prior to that September 7, 1980 date, one day could qualify, but after that date, it's a 2-year requirement. So if a veteran served for a year, was discharged, and it was determined they don't meet any of the exceptions, that veteran would not qualify because they don't meet the 2-year requirement. Reserve and guard time is similar to active duty for training. This is used when there's a reservist or guards person who not have qualifying active duty. It's not mean they didn't serve honorably, but it just means that they don't meet the active duty requirement to be eligible for the burial benefit. There's some other ones there that we won't really go into, but there are some instances, though very rare, where we can't find any military information. that case, reach out to the family. We like to say turn over every rock that we can to find any information, but unfortunately, we do have instances where we just cannot obtain any military information to establish eligibility. Next slide. So let's change gears again and talk a little bit about pre-need eligibility for burial. The eligibility is very similar to time of need burial that we just discussed. What's exciting about the pre-need program is it now allows veterans and their loved ones to apply in advance to see if they're eligible to be buried. This eliminates a lot of the work and worry at the time of need and makes the process easier for the family. It's important to know pre-need means before time of need. So before there is a death, for lack of a better term. And again, it helps families plan in advance. If it arises where someone has passed away, that wouldn't be considered a pre-need determination. That's when it would be considered a time of need burial. That family would contact our scheduling office so we could treat it as a time of need burial. Next slide. So a high-level overview of the pre-need eligibility program. It's for VA national cemeteries only, and it does not ensure any space in any particular cemetery, and it's not a reservation. So there's a lot of confusion about this because on the form, we ask the desired cemetery. Just important to reiterate that it's not guaranteed a spot in that cemetery. So if someone picks Calverton, for instance, in New York, at the time of death, that cemetery's full, they'd have to look at additional cemeteries in that area. Approval status may change and additional verification may be needed at the time of death. So there are instances where certain circumstances may change to where we would have to reevaluate the pre-need determination. Important thing for us here at NCSO are the recommended applicants. We want to make sure we're reaching out to the families and service members who could benefit most from our program. Unmarried adult children. A lot of times those take additional documents and verification from doctors and different providers to determine the circumstances. So those take some more time. So we were looking for them to submit. Reservists who are unsure if their service qualifies. As you can tell from the previous slides, eligibility can be complex and it's confusing for our service members. Veterans and family members just with general questions regarding their specific eligibility. And surviving spouses, previously interred veterans, again, process for knowing whether you're eligible as a spouse can sometimes be confusing, and we welcome them to apply. Slide. So what information do I need to apply? Like most VA benefits or any benefit, we're going to ask for certain information. And of course, it's your primary identifying information. Social security number, date of place of birth, military service history. We always say err on the side of more. The more information, the more documents you can provide us, the better. Let us go ahead and determine if what was submitted is sufficient. If not, we'll go on and get what we need. If you're applying as a spouse or surviving a spouse, sometimes additional information may be needed to verify marriage, or in the case of an adult dependent children, as I discussed, we may need some additional medical documentation. If you're applying on behalf of someone else, we'll need supporting documentation to show that you have authority to apply for that person, whether it's a VSR, appointment as a claimant representative, power of attorney, what have you. We'll request that information at that time. Slide. So here you'll see the VA form to submit a request for pre-need eligibility. Also VA form 40-10007. I'm a veteran myself. I know, filling out VA forms is not the funnest thing in the world, but we try to make it as easy as possible. first thing you want to do is choose what VA National Cemetery you would prefer to be buried in. Again, it's not a reservation, but we do like to capture that. Again, it's for VA National Cemeteries only. And important to note, and a lot of questions on this does not apply to Arlington National Cemetery. So for those who may not be aware, VA and NCA do not oversee Arlington National Cemetery. That's run by the Department of Defense and the Army. Again, it does not guarantee a space in any specific national cemetery. We recommend in bullet 2, gather supporting documents and information you'll need. And all that information is laid out in the form and the instructions. It's important to note, if a veteran is submitting a claim and a spouse is submitting a claim at the same time, it's important to have 2 separate applications for each person requesting the termination to fill it out and sign it on their own on their behalf. Next slide. So the form's broken down into 3 sections. So this kind of just focuses in on the first section, which is the veteran service member information. And I won't go into all the information, but it's kind of self-explanatory. The veteran's personal information, marital status, military status, and any service information that's available. So we ask again, complete this as thoroughly as possible and err on the side of more information and determine if we need to get any additional information on our end. Slide. Section 2 is the claimant information. So this section, section 2, if you go back to the next previous slide, this could be different than the veteran. So say, for instance, a spouse is submitting a pre-need claim. The top portion would be the veteran information, but section 2 would be that spouse's information because they're the actual claimant. See from the drop-down boxes, that's where we identify the relationship to the veteran. And all the information in boxes 25 through 31 are actually information requested for the claimant. Slide. Section 3, any other VA form, there's a place for signature and date. And you'll notice in box 34, we again ask for the relationship to the veteran. Are you submitting the request as self as a veteran? And that's where you would identify in B if you're an individual signing for claimant, anyone who's a VSR, power of attorney, someone who may be incapacitated or unable to provide and fill out the form on their own. Next slide. So how do you apply for this benefit? Preferred method is online through the va.gov website. That's the preferred method, and that method makes it a lot easier for us because a lot of that information is automated and fed into our systems automatically. We do have the VA form 40-10007 that is available for submission by mail, and requests may also be faxed in. Again, for faster processing, again, I'll say it again, the more documentation, the better. Next slide. So what happens after I apply? Pre-need program has been very popular program, and we were happy to bring it to our service members. So I'm happy to say that we've worked through a significant backlog, and our response times have gotten a lot better. So we will process the request as soon as we can, and you'll be notified as soon as a decision is made. Be notified via mail of the results of the determination. For more information on the pre-need program or eligibility or any questions regarding burial in National Cemetery, the number listed there is for the scheduling office, but specifically option 4 is our pre-need department. They can answer any questions pertaining to pre-need burial. And for more information, again, on anything regarding burial in National Cemetery or memorial benefits in general, the website is listed there. Next slide. Again, thank you for the opportunity to brief. I know it's a lot of information in a very short period of time, but we're here, Jay and I are here to answer any questions you have, and feel free to reach out to us even after the webinar with any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ecker, for that very informative presentation. Now I will address the one question we have in our Q&A box, and it is from Dale Nunnery. He says, I have submitted the application as pre-need. Is there a site that shows the application has been approved?
So unfortunately, we do not have a site specific where you can check a status update like you would with other VA benefits. As Steve discussed in the presentation, you will receive a letter from us with the eligibility determination, or approval or denial letter, and process rights around that. NCA is currently at about a 30 to 40 day window to process applications. So say right now we're processing December 19th through January 1st. So we process them as a first in, first out. So right now, about 30 to 40 days to process the applications. Or at any time, you can also call our 800 number, 800-535-1117, option 4, and ask for a status update, and provide you with an estimated time frame as well.
Our second question comes from Lindsay Henderson. The question is there a pre-need phone number for Arlington?
For Arlington, you have to call Arlington directly, because as Steve mentioned, they are managed by the Department of the Army. So they do not have pre-need application forms, but they have their own separate process that they can walk you through for eligibility within Arlington.
Well, that's all the questions. So at this time, I would like to turn the mic back over to Mr. Washington, who will be providing us with some closing remarks.
Thank you, Nicholas. I want to thank all of you for joining us. Jay and Stephen, I know this topic is difficult for some, and I know that you all do this often, so we really appreciate you sharing information. I think my employee just mentioned we have one more question. Nicholas, we have a little time. Why don't you go ahead and provide that question to the experts there, please.
From Kimberly M., I think you mentioned this, but how does a double veteran family proceed with pre-need?
So you can do it individually. You both the members can submit separate applications, because if you're both veterans, you both have served honorably and have the right for a designated grave site. So it would be just like everybody else. You would be able to submit your own individual packets and get approval. Now, we also talked about adjacent grave sites. So a veteran married to another veteran is one of the unique circumstances that we have, where when the time comes when the first family member passes, we alert the cemetery of veteran married to a veteran so that they can do this set aside for you. But normal process for submitting a pre-need application.
Our next question comes from Furman Reed. Where can hard copies of the Planning Your Legacy VA Survivors and Burial Benefits Kit to distribute Vietnam era veterans?
So there is a link, and we can provide that as a follow-up for the planning kit that you can get digitally, or you can request that as well. And we can provide that information to you after the fact. So we can definitely get one mailed out to you if you need us to, sir.
Robert Katzor says, I keep seeing what is covered and uncovered for military veterans. I'm not exactly sure if that's a question.
Is that the entire question, sir?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a question or not.
Yeah, we
So
can get back with him on that one. That's a little unclear. Are there any other ones?
that's it. So back to you, Mr. Washington.
Yeah. So look, we appreciate you, you guys coming out. I know you're busy. So again, says, can you please restate who the caller is and missed the information? So I'm sorry, Will, I can't understand that question. Can you provide that information? Can you please restate who the,
I think what they're looking for here is when the application is being submitted, the claimant information is the person requesting the application. So we provide veteran information, and then the claimant could be a non-veteran spouse or an unmarried adult child that has some dependency. So the claimant will always be the person that is filing the application, and it may be the veteran themselves, or it may be their spouse, or on behalf of one of their adult dependent children.
right? Okay, yeah, that's a good clarification. Steve, thanks very much. Well, I think we hit all the questions. I hope we did. If there
We
are
have
any other
another
questions,
question from Armin Franco. Once the application is approved, how does NCSO determine cemetery availability?
So at the time of need, so if it's approved, let's say you submitted and were approved today, and then God willing, you live another 20 years. There's always a time, so you're going to put your cemetery of preference in there, and the family member or the funeral home that is calling to schedule the service will inquire about that specific cemetery. Uh, so as cemeteries may fill up, and they may not have that service available, we will help you redirect to another one somewhere. If there's a new cemetery being built out in that general area, we try to keep it within the 75-mile radius.
Our next question is from Donna Zener. And I am in Northern Nevada, and they say that the spouse can be interred with the veteran in the vault. Is that accurate? That would be a both cremated.
Yes. So in many cases, the National Cemetery Administration actually places pre-placed crypts underground in preparation for families, and they will hold two individual caskets. But they can also be cremains as well. And let's say if you were interested in being interred in a columbarium wall, it can hold more than one standard size urn as well if they're cremated.
Kimberly M. asks, could an organization have a pre-need workshop that assists veterans and encourages veterans to complete these forms?
Yes, very much so. We have a lot of veteran service organizations that do have those activities, and there are a number of outreach events as well, where we have NCA employees, whether it's cemetery staff or others, that may have those events, and we'll have resources there to support as well.
Larry C. asks, is time served during the Cold War reflected on the gravestone?
So we take any period of service. So no matter what your first date, let's say you're enlisted, your first enlistment date, your entire service, from the date that you entered the service till your separation or retirement date. So the entire time is there. Doesn't matter war periods. We add that in as individuals have served in specific wars.
Okay, now I believe that's all of the questions. So I turn the mic back over to Mr. Washington.
yeah, all right. Hey, no worries. We want to make sure that we get these questions answered. And again, Jay and Steve, we appreciate you guys being here. As I talk, I don't see anymore. But again, thank you all for joining us today. If something comes in your mind where you have additional questions afterwards, there's information on the screen right now for Jay and Steve. If you reach out to our office, we'll make sure that they get those questions. So again, thank you all very much and have a blessed day.
If you register for this event, we will provide you with today's presentation at a later date. You can find it on our website. Please subscribe to our Facebook for future webinars and information. This adjourns today's webinar. Thank you and have a good afternoon.